So, Superman. Everyone seems to love it. Can one of you explain why? Part of me does get it. We're in a pretty difficult era to be living in, and positivity can be a bit hard to come by. And with the terrible versions of the characters that have been provided by the Snyderverse, people are excited for a hopeful Superman who will even save a squirrel. And yeah, I can appreciate all of that. It's probably the things I like most about the movie. Same with the pretty obvious pro-Palestine sentiments. Likely one of the biggest movies of the year, and it's very open about a topic that most movies would be incredibly scared of addressing at all. And I like those parts, but that's most of what I liked. Thematic elements. But as a movie, the more I think about it, the more I think I dislike it. It's been a few days now, and I've only seen it once, and admittedly, it's a rare instance where I actually really want to go see it again. I'm curious how my opinion will be affected on a second watch, now knowing what to expect. So, before we go more into the details, I think something I need to address is that I'm not a DC guy. I never have been, and I think that's part of where my dislike for this is coming from. So, I got into superheroes around the time Avengers came out, and my main experience with DC as a franchise was the DCEU. Later on, I watched the Dark Knight trilogy and the first classic Keaton Batman, and if memory serves, that's the only DC content from prior to Man of Steel that I've seen. Since Man of Steel, I stayed fairly up to date until Justice League, after which, in theaters, I only saw Aquaman, Suicide Squad, and Batman. And on my own time, I've also watched Joker, Shazam 1, Peacemaker, Penguin, Snyder's Justice League, and honestly, probably my favorite one, Lego Batman. And that's kind of my entire DC experience. So, I didn't grow up with, and still somewhat lack, a great example of the brand. And by no means have I seen a very extensive history of its characters. I'm not really that familiar with the characters and concepts that aren't within the DCEU. And I feel like that really affected how I view this movie. Because I feel everyone else has at least seen the Christopher Reeve Superman, or watched the animated shows. But me? My experience with Jimmy Olsen is a guy I don't remember, who I didn't remember getting shot in a scene I didn't remember happening in a movie I barely remember. So when this movie came out and everyone talked about how much they loved this Jimmy, I just think, why? What? This character seems like he's vaguely familiar with Lois and seems like kind of a dick. But he's apparently a chick magnet, which I genuinely did not understand until I saw people talking about it online, because I felt like there's no way this dude was getting a lot of that attention. He is not very nice, he's not very confident, he's not very attractive, and he's kind of rude and difficult. Also, apparently there's other important characters at the Daily Planet. There's the boss guy. And, yeah, I think that's it. Wait, what do you mean this lady was an important character? This dude was? Who are these people? Was this guy even in the movie? I have watched several review channels, and multiple of them have discussed some of these characters as highlights of the movie. Highlights!
The Daily Planet staff, which were so fun, I want to see more of them. Mm-hmm. I want to see more Jimmy Olsen. I want to see more like Steve Lombard. They were fun, dude. They were really, really fun.
I also really love how much of a focus the Daily Planet got. Not just because we have the spinning globe on top of the building again, but the cast had a ton of energy and was super fun to watch. It didn't just feel like Lois and the extras. The standout to me, though, was Beck Bennett as Steve Lombard. I've been a fan of Beck ever since his YouTube sketch days and his time on SNL, so I was really excited to see him here, and he was probably the funniest part of the movie.
I can't even name them. They were on screen for like 10 seconds. What is a single character trait that they have displayed? There's a single one I can name a trait of, and that trait is boobs. I think this ties into a greater problem that Clark Kent basically does not exist in the movie. He's in like 10 minutes of it. I think we got like the absolute barest minimum for Ma and Pa Kent, and that's if I'm generous. But the Daily Planet stuff, that's unforgivably minimal. Jimmy Olsen is one of the most important parts of Superman's life, and I don't even think the two of them talked. And if they did, clearly it was not significant. Jimmy is mostly in his own really stupid plotline that thinks it's way funnier than it is, while Superman and Lois are off doing the actual plot. But speaking of that, this movie is weirdly unfunny. I like James Gunn and his humor. I think Guardians 1 has aged into a movie that's really just fine and is one of the most overrated in the MCU, but the rest of his work I've largely enjoyed a lot. And I think his jokes are often the better ones in the MCU. So it's really weird that in his movie about the quintessential positive character, there's very little humor. Or should I say, good humor. Holy shit, Crypto is so much less funny than the movie thinks he is. And it's the same joke like 9 times, and it goes for 2 minutes each time. It's ridiculous. The Cosmo joke in Guardians 3 is pretty comparable, and it's mentioned like 3 times and takes 20 seconds each time. My theater was dead silent. The single joke that landed with anyone was the bit at the end with Metamorpho and Guy. And that still only got a slight chuckle from my mom. Admittedly, the theater wasn't that full, but the movie just still felt strangely unfunny. When a character saying good gosh and what the hey is some of the funniest parts of the movie, it feels a little strange, especially considering I feel like the movie thinks it is funny. I mean, one of the most humorous parts is strangely also one of the darkest, and it's a moment that makes the tone feel extremely confusing. Lex shooting a guy in the face on the second spin of the barrel is a morbidly humorous moment, which feels like a scene from Peacemaker shoved into a story that's supposed to have a far lighter tone. The tone is just really weird in this movie. It jumps from Superman is great and the world is happy, but Lex sucks, to everyone hates Superman and he's brutally tortured mentally and physically. And then back to Superman inspires everyone and everything is good and happy and everyone loves him and hates Lex. It doesn't even feel like a natural progression, which I think it has to do in part with the poor pacing. Act 1 is really fast-paced, and it took me a while to understand the kind of vibe I think they were going for, but Act 2 brought things to a screeching halt. Superman is locked up and dying for like a third of it, then he's in a river for another third of it. I'm not even saying slow moments are bad. One of my favorite parts was the Ma and Pa Kent scenes, and frankly, I think this movie needed more slow moments. The problem is, the river scene lasts for, like, most of the second act. It's probably the second longest sequence in the movie, preceded only by the evil Superman fight. Oh yeah, is that supposed to be a twist? It's presented like one, and not even like a Red Hulk or a Stranger type of way, where it feels like it's more confirmation than a twist. I think this was actually meant as a twist, and I don't know, it's just not that surprising for one, but also, it's not exactly built up like a twist. They made no moments of making you wonder who's under the mask. There's not a single moment of that in the entire movie. And that kind of felt like a general thing. I had heard the thing about his parents in advance, but I was surprised how the movie felt like it wasn't even presenting that as an actual plot twist. It felt like a very big thing for it to drop, but I feel like the audience wasn't meant to care. Clark was. But I don't know, maybe an evil Superman clone is a big thing in the comics, so that's meant as a bigger reveal. I wouldn't know, though, and the movie doesn't really make you consider the possibility, considering it shoves the dude through a black hole. But that potential assumption of comic knowledge seems like a bit of a running thing. I'm genuinely curious if general audiences understood this dude's name was Guy, considering it's a very unusual name, and how the word guy can literally be used to refer to anyone. The only dialogue in the movie that has his name, which is the first time they say it, I don't know, it struck me as one of those moments where I'm not sure if people will realize that his name is actually Guy. And, that's not even mentioning, I don't know what these two's names are. I know they're hero names, but frankly, I don't think I would have known she's called Hot Girl if I wasn't engaged in online discourse surrounding superhero movies. Also, like, what is Hot Girl? Why was she screaming like that? Is that a power of hers, or is that just a thing she does? Also, why does it look like she goes cross-eyed anytime she does it? Were they trying to give grifters thumbnail fuel? What are Green Lanterns, exactly? What is that supposed vow he talked about? I get that it's a bit that Guy uses it to avoid doing things he doesn't want to, but it sounds like there is an actual vow. Is Mr. Terrific just a smart tech guy, or is there more going on with these? The dude soloed an entire army, so is he bulletproof? They had guns. What's Clark's story? Are his parents still around? Are they going to come after him? What's up with Krypton in this version? In general, this movie follows the philosophy of show, don't tell. But by showing, I don't mean delivering exposition. I mean doing things that'll make the comic fans point and say, it's the thing! Those questions I listed probably have obvious answers to DC fans, but the movie doesn't even moderately address this stuff, which raises the question of why they introduced so many characters they couldn't develop yet. And that's kind of another general issue. This doesn't feel like a beginning. This feels like the MCU starting with Iron Man 2. Like, yeah, you probably could have done that, but it's a much messier and busier start. Iron Man remains a gold standard for starting a franchise because it was small scale and then promised the idea that there would be more. I think starting a franchise partway into the history can work, but you still have to do the character work. You can't assume people will just care about the characters because of their names, and it's kind of driving me crazy that DC fans seem to be doing exactly that. Daily Planet characters with 0 screen time are being praised as great characters. Lois, Clark, Ma, Pa, Guy, Terrific, and Lex are the only characters I feel were actually handled well so far. Everyone else so far seems to barely exist for the most part. And with Guy and Terrific, who I still don't know the name of, they're well handled as minor players in someone else's story. But if they're ever going to be major players in their own story, they need more. They're both fun to watch, but that alone cannot carry the character. And, I mean, that's a lot of issues I have from an analysis perspective, but I did say I liked thematic elements. I only say elements because the execution didn't quite land for me, which is really disappointing. I was hoping for the optimistic pick-me-up type of movie that everyone else seems to be describing this as. I could use that right about now. And I think the worst part is, I was trying to get that feeling, and it didn't land for me. I was waiting for the moment that would hit me with the kind of hope I feel when watching Ted Lasso.
Oh man, to believe in yourself, to believe in one another, man, that's fundamental to being alive. And look, hey, if you can do that, if each of you can truly do that, can't nobody rip that apart.
Or the feeling of inspiration I feel when seeing Subaru's big speech in Season 3.
Hold on to the ones you care about and kick that weak heart that lost all hope right out of here. And then, after you've done that, you can leave everything else to me!
And the moment it never came. And somehow, the moment that came the closest was given to Guy. His arrival in Palestine was the closest it got to feeling like Clark was really that inspiration, that symbol of hope. But again, even that moment didn't fully land. The minimal screen time given to him kind of strips away the potential impact of the arc that him and Hawkgirl have. And Metamorpho? It didn't even really seem like Superman inspired him, so much as he just realized that Lex was a total piece of shit and so much worse than he thought. We have no context for how long he had been in the prison, or who he was before the prison, so helping Palestine could have been something he was willing to do the entire time. I think this goes back to the tone issue I was talking about. I feel like I needed a really big moment to contrast the sadness and horror of everything Lex did, because, my god, that dude was shockingly evil. And when these dorks can make me cry from their sense of hope, when Superman can't, I don't know, the movie feels a bit emotionally underwhelming. And I think that has to do in part with the extremely lackluster soundtrack. The movie kept teasing the classic Superman theme, while rarely doing anything else that I could ever notice. And then, with all that buildup, It builds up, and up, and up, and up, and up. Yeah, it's kind of like that. They never bring in some big, grand version of the theme. The closest we get to a musical climax is Guy and the others arriving to beat up Israel. It is a bizarrely underwhelming movie from this perspective, especially from James fucking Gunn, the guy who loves using music. The one movie that has to rely on a score instead of needle drops, and the use of the score is probably one of the worst he's ever done. I wish I liked this movie, but the more I look back, the more I'm bothered by it. And I have to admit, I'm kinda baffled I'm alone on this. I have to wonder how many of the people singing its praises are DC fans and how many are just grateful to get a good version of Superman on the big screen. I'm glad for that. But frankly, through just the one season I've watched, the story that does it way, way better in almost every single category is My Adventures with Superman.
I get scared, but that is being human, and that's my greatest strength.